When asked which part of the MCOC story is the hardest, most would probably say somewhere near the end. Act 7 and 8 are a little easier than Act 6, so maybe Deep Act 6. 6.2.5 is a common answer. But if we say the hardest quest is the one that causes the most people to get stuck, then I would say that 6.2.5 is not the right answer. In fact, I don't even think it's in Act 6 at all. Act 5, Chapter 2, Quest number 4, Lines in the Sand, the roadblock for 99% of MCOC players. Today I'm going to show you everything you need to know to not only beat this quest, but every other time Masochism rears its ugly head throughout the whole contest. And if this video does well, I will look into making more guides for some of these earlier roadblock quests and annoying nodes throughout the contest. Before we get properly started, I want to add two things. Firstly, if you're stuck here and getting annoyed, congratulations. That makes you fairly normal. Most players will get stuck here. You've been relying on parry to help you get through, and you've been practicing that timing, and suddenly you're not able to use it. Also, the extra healing here can suddenly make fights take a lot longer, which increases the chances of you getting smacked in the face. Secondly, I have been playing this game for a long time, and I still hate Masochism. I groan when it comes up in Alliance Quest, and get annoyed when I see it in any other quest. So let's have a look at exactly what makes 5.2.4 just so annoying. Primarily, it's the global node, Masochism. This is applied to every fight in the entire quest, including the boss. Masochism also shows up in at least 10 other story chapters, as well as high-end Alliance Quest and variant content. So let's have a look at this node in detail. It reads, whenever the defender, that's them, is inflicted with a debuff, it is immediately purified, so it's removed off them, and the defender regenerates 5% of their maximum health, and then this goes on cooldown for 7 seconds. There is a timer that comes up so you can see when it's about to come back again. 5% health here isn't a huge amount, and any champion with decent damage will be able to simply bypass this healing, so that's not what makes it the most annoying. What makes it annoying is the debuff that can be removed is one like stun, your parry stun. This is what you'll most commonly use to get your openings, and up until this point, you've been relying on this parry stun as well as muscle memory. But now, you haven't got your parry stun, and muscle memory tells you to go in and hit them. But you can't, and instead they hit you. So how do we beat it? The most important thing here is champion selection, and I will be going over various different types of champions that can be used in order to try and bypass Masochism. Our first category is simply special champions, and here I'm mainly talking about Ghost and Quake. They have two very different playstyles from pretty much every other champion in the entire game, and when played properly, can bypass the debuff shrug of Masochism. However, by this point in the game, it is unlikely that you will know how to play them to an advanced enough level to do this, but I thought I'd still mention them. The second category of champions is one I'm calling passive stun champions, and there are 3: OG Storm, Storm Pyramid X, and Bishop. In their abilities, they can directly bypass Masochism. If they inflict a stun debuff that is removed, it is instantly replaced with a stun passive that cannot be removed. This will allow you to then go in and get your opening. It is important to note that for OG Storm and for Bishop, their conversion only works against skill champions. So for example, Punisher or Winter Soldier from 5.2.4. For Storm Pyramid X, however, this works against all champions. We can see here that as soon as the parry stun is removed from Yellow Jacket, Storm X instantly places a passive stun over the top. This does trigger Masochism, so the cooldown timer restarts, and regular parry stuns will work. We can see here that against a non-skill champion, Storm does not work, but against a skill champion here with Bishop, it works as intended. Next up, we have ability accuracy reduction champions. So let's say you don't have any of the 3 passive stun champions. Well, there are a few that can simply bypass Masochism in a different way. Let's start with the champion that I think is the best counter for Masochism, Apocalypse. As part of his base kit, opponents' purify effects, which is what they use to remove debuffs from Masochism, suffer minus 100% ability accuracy, so they can't happen. As you can see here, I can parry this yellow jacket as much as I want to, without having to worry about Masochism at all. Do note that a very common synergy piece for Apocalypse is to bring Cable along. However, Cable is not required for this piece of utility. Apocalypse is also an absolute tank, allowing you to keep going even if you do mess up and get hit. So if you don't have Apocalypse, the next best option is Proxima Midnight. She is not as simple to play as Apocalypse, but when she blocks, her opponents suffer minus 200% ability accuracy reduction. So, as we can see here, she can parry all day without having to worry about Masochism at all. Next up, we have Omega Red. He places spores on the opponent when nearby, and each spore on the opponent can reduce their purify chance by up to 10%. 10 spores means 100% reduction, so no shrug off. He can place up to 30 spores, but that requires his death field to be active. 10 spores can be placed without. Finally in this section we have Sabertooth, but for him to work you must bring along Black Panther Civil War, or Killmonger. They must be on the team as well. They provide Sabertooth with a synergy that allows him to bypass Masochism in effectively the same way as Apocalypse and Proxima Midnight. Next up, we have champions, any champion that simply has a lot of debuffs. This means that when you apply your parry stun, there's a pretty good chance that Masochism will be on cooldown as one of your many other debuffs has been eaten up, rather than that stun. Some good options are Black Widow Deadly Origin, as she inflicts a large number of shocks, Gore the God Butcher, if you have him, he's quite new at the time of this video, and his damaging debuffs, Havoc and his plasma debuffs that build up on the opponent, and finally Sunspot with all his incinerates. There are many others that could fit into this category. In order to help around Masochism, you can simply bring healing champions, tanky champions, or any champion with a high block proficiency. These fights can take a bit longer, and so having some really good sustainability can go a long way. There are many champions that have access to really good healing. Awakened King Groot, OG Wolverine, X-23, who is a champion that I personally used a long time ago, Diablo, and so on. For tanky champions, anyone with a high health pool is really good. Sasquatch, Rintra, King Groot again, and Apocalypse, also again, are also great champions here, all with top 10 health pools. Block proficiency isn't as important, but we will touch on it again later, and it can just help mitigate block damage in general. Some really great champions with high block proficiency are Captain America Infinity War, Professor X, and Scorpion. The final champion that might be worth bringing, but not actually using, is Magneto House of X, also known as White Magneto, White Mags, or just Wags. He has a pre-fight that you can activate on the screen before you go into the fight, as you can see here, that gives a bonus 15% damage to all champions that go into that fight. Additionally, if the champion that goes in is a metal champion or a hero champion, all of their parry stuns will be converted into passive stuns for that fight. This costs him 2 charges and he starts with 6, meaning you have a free pass for up to 3 fights in the quest, and I will go on later to suggest which ones I think you should use them for. So you're in the awkward position of having none of the champions I've mentioned so far. Well, there is one final thing you can do, and that's just play around the node. I will be demonstrating a few techniques here that you can use to go your whole fight without parrying, or at least without getting hit in the face. First up is reparrying. What this involves is blocking when you know the opponent won't be stunned. So you will parry them, release your block for a fraction of a second, and then try and parry their second attack in their combo. It requires good practice and good timing, but it can really shine here against Masochism, and also for any non-contact first medium attack. Think Havoc, Iron Man Infinity War, so on. Next thing that's worth learning is baiting heavy attacks out of your opponent. If you stand still and hold block, eventually they'll run in at you and start hitting your block. This is where those high block proficiency champions come in really useful. They will, though, get bored and throw a heavy attack to try and break through your block. This is your moment. If you see they're charging a heavy attack, you can back off, wait for the animation to finish, and then dash in and get your opening that way before they can recover. You will take a bit of damage here, but again, high block proficiency is really useful. And then finally we have intercepting. This is probably the most advanced of the three strategies and also the riskiest, but can reward you with damage-free openings. If you can see the opponent is about to dash towards you, you can dash at them and hit them before they can hit you. Here you can see my opponent is just about to dash in at me, so I dash in at them. From there I can just go straight into my standard combo, as this is just my opening medium attack. This requires practice and you will get hit in the face, but is a really good skill to learn. It also works best against more aggressive opponents. So, which path to take? The path I would recommend starting with is this one, starting by going through Yellow Jacket and then Deadpool. The path here has the most simple opponents that I could find through the quest, as well as the nicest local node on each of them. Here we have Optimist and Pessimist. There are two trickier champions on this path. The first one is the first fight, Yellow Jacket. He is the first fight, which is actually good news, as you can simply go in and out until you've beaten him. The other challenge is Punisher. His specials cannot be easily avoided, and he can hit pretty hard for a defender of this level. He also has Indestructible when he should die, which can catch you off guard. He can also heal from Masochism in this state if you are triggering it. So be careful at this point, because even though Indestructible can only trigger once per fight, it can trigger every fight. If you die and have to go back in, you will have to whittle him back down to his Indestructible, survive that before you can actually knock him out. The final problem in this quest is Storm, the boss. Her specials are fairly annoying to avoid, so it could be worth practicing this if you have a Storm of your own before you go in. But what makes her an actual issue is the additional node, Caltrops. This triggers a medium-sized bleed on you, but it triggers every time you dash back. This means if you bring in a non-bleed immune champion, they will melt fairly quickly. Luckily, bleed immunity is one of the most common immunities in the game. In my opinion, the best option for this fight is Ghost, but that is simply because she can melt any fight where lots of damaging debuffs are placed onto her. Whenever she phases, any damaging debuff on her will be converted into a large fury, and she can do a lot of damage very quickly. Build up a few furies from phasing off some bleeds, one special too, and the fight's over. The second option here, for champions that we've already brought in, is Apocalypse. When he is bled for a total of 8 seconds in one fight, he will go bleed immune. So prepare to lose a bit of health here if this is the first time you're bleeding. But if you die, once you have gained the bleed immunity and go back in, he will keep this bleed immunity. It does also carry from fight to fight, so if you picked it up, say getting hit by Punisher's Special 1, which has a bleed on it, this will carry over from that fight throughout the entire rest of the quest to this one. The best thing I can advise to do here is to look in your roster, see what is bleed immune, and use the tips that I gave around playing around the node to help get it down. There are a few other nodes that can be found on Storm, but they aren't that important. Limbo will mean any stun you do land will gradually be shortened over time, Transducer will slowly drain your power, but you get more anyway, and so on. Caltrops and Masochism are the only two that really matter here. So that's it. Everything you need to know to beat Masochism and destroy this quest. Do remember though that this is story content, so it's not going away anytime soon. If you get stuck here and find yourself spending a lot of resources, stop and focus on something else. The monthly event quest is a great place to pick up more materials, shards and units. If you have any other questions about this wonderful quest, please leave them below and I will see you all next time.